What's going on, guys? Welcome back to TFD, your channel for all things truth, facts, and discussion. I'm Cordy, and today we're diving into something a little different, something that's been circulating quietly, but raising a lot of eyebrows in the world of women's basketball. Now, before we get into it, let me be clear. Everything in this video is alleged, not confirmed. None of what I'm about to discuss has been officially verified, but the dots that have been connected here are pretty wild. And honestly, a bit concerning. So, with that being said, let's take it straight to Indianapolis, home of the Fever. Now, the Fever, as we all know, are owned by the Simon family. Yes, that Simon family. Herb Simon, the same man who owns the Indiana Pacers, also owns the Fever. That means the same management tree, the same business DNA runs through both franchises. When the Fever drafted Caitlin Clark, it was one of the biggest moments in league history. Caitlin wasn't just a star coming out of Iowa. She was the story in sports. The most talked about, the most followed, the most electric name we'd seen in a long time. Her college highlights were everywhere, her jersey sales shattered records, and her arrival was expected to transform the WNBA. But when Caitlin came to Indiana, she entered a system led by Christy Sides, a coach already in place before her arrival. The early part of that relationship? Rough, rocky even. There were clear signs of struggle, chemistry issues, play style differences, and an overall adjustment period. But somewhere in the middle of the season, things started to click. Christy realized that if the Fever were going to succeed, they had to play through Caitlin. And when that happened, the team started to win. The Fever made the playoffs for the first time in years. It looked like they were finally building something special. Then, out of nowhere, Christy Sides was fired. And that's where the story gets interesting. She was reportedly paid off something like 6 figures to not coach this season. And in came Stephanie White. Now, I want to be fair here. This is not about attacking Stephanie White. But the truth is, she came in with her own plan, her own vision, and from what we've seen, it hasn't exactly aligned with Caitlin Clark's strengths. She implemented a motion-style offense that took the ball out of Caitlin's hands, the very hands that made her one of the most exciting players in basketball. The result, the Fever's offense lost its identity. Ticket sales dropped, viewership declined, and that Logo 3 Caitlin magic that drew millions to their TVs, gone. Now, here's where it gets a little murkier, and again, this is alleged. Word is Stephanie White might be facing some internal friction within the organization. There's been whispers about tension involving Amber Cox and Kelly Kroskoff. Recently, a YouTube sports commentator claimed to have insider information, details he shouldn't have known if he wasn't connected somehow. And while we can't verify that, it does raise serious questions about what's really going on behind the scenes in Indianapolis. Whatever the truth may be, one thing's for sure. Something's happening within that organization, and fans deserve answers. Because when you've got a generational talent like Caitlin Clark, the last thing Stephanie White do is take the ball out of Caitlin's hands.
Let's jump right into this thing, because this part right here, this is where it starts to get really interesting. So let's talk about Herb Simon. Yes, that Herb Simon. A lot of people know the name, but don't really know the man behind it. Herb Simon is the owner of the Indiana Pacers, and, of course, the Indiana Fever. He's been around the basketball world for decades, and his family name carries a lot of weight in Indianapolis. But here's something many of you might not realize. Herb Simon is 90 years old. Yeah, you heard that right. 90. Now, let's be honest. Do we really think a 90-year-old billionaire is handling all the day-to-day operations of Pacers sports and entertainment, making roster decisions, managing business moves? Probably not. That's not how this level of wealth and power works. Billionaires have structures. They have family members and executives who take over operations while they remain the figurehead, the name at the top of the ownership line. So when you look at Herb Simon today, you've got to start asking, who's really pulling the strings? Who's really running Pacers entertainment behind the scenes? Because Herb Simon might be the owner on paper, but it's his family, his heirs, who are actually calling the shots. Now,
Let's fast forward a bit. Herb Simon has 8 kids. That's right, 8. And one of them in particular keeps popping up when you start digging into the structure of the Pacers organization. Stephen Howard Simon. Let's pull him up. Stephen Simon, that's the name that you'll find connected to Pacers Entertainment. You can find him on X, formerly Twitter. Doesn't post much, doesn't have many followers, but that's not surprising. When you're sitting on a billion-dollar empire, you're not exactly worried about likes or retweets. What matters is influence, power, and control. Now, when you dig into Stephen Simon's background, you'll find that he's not just some family member living off his dad's legacy. Allegedly, he's deeply involved in the operations. He's been described as one of the key decision-makers inside Pacer Sports and Entertainment, the same organization that owns both the Pacers and the Fever. So while Herb Simon's name is on the door, it's Stephen Simon who's said to be running the day-to-day side of things. And here's where things connect, because if Stephen Simon is the one overseeing operations, that makes him the real boss of people like Amber Cox and Kelly Kroskoff, the 2 executives heavily involved with the Indiana Fever. That means when major decisions are made, coaching changes, player moves, organizational direction, those calls likely trace back to Stephen, not Herb. So when we start hearing rumors, seeing questionable decisions, or noticing shifts in how the Fever are being managed, maybe the question isn't, what is Herb Simon doing? Maybe the real question is, what is Stephen Simon deciding? Because from all appearances, he's the man behind the curtain, the one really running the show in Indiana. Now, we all know what happened the other day. Venom Reacts dropped a podcast that sent shockwaves throughout the basketball community. The man came out swinging, exposing what he claimed were major behind-the-scenes issues involving Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever organization. And let me tell you, the things that were said got people talking. So while Venom's podcast was live and going viral, another pair of content creators jumped in, Livewire Sports React and Nicole Rants. They decided to partner up and do a full reaction breakdown of Venom's podcast, dissecting what was said and how deep it might go. Now, that's where things took an even crazier turn, because in the comments section of their stream, someone using the name Truth and Consequence started dropping some wild information. This user wrote, and I quote, "Yes, Steve Simon runs the team, not his father Herb, who's 92. Call Kelly Kroskoff right now." Now, when I saw that, I was like, hold up, what's going on here? So I looked deeper. I reached out, and the same person sent me more screenshots, more comments, and I'll be honest, what they were saying lined up a little too well with things we've already been hearing. Now, some of what I'm about to read might be slightly out of order, but it paints a pretty interesting picture. Here's what one of the screenshots said. After that meeting I just mentioned, Steve Simon called Kelly Kroskoff, Amber Cox, and Stephanie White into his office and let them know in no uncertain terms that this was CCT from here on out. Now, that's a key line. CCT from here on out. We've got to assume that means Caitlin Clark's team, meaning from that point forward, the Indiana Fever were supposed to be built around Caitlin, the franchise centerpiece, the system, the marketing, the direction, all centered around Caitlin. But that's not what we heard later from Stephanie White, right? Because just recently, Stephanie made it very clear that her top priority was Kelsey Mitchell, not Caitlin Clark. She literally said she's building around Kelsey. And that directly contradicts what these alleged insider comments claim Steve Simon told them. Now, there was another message in that same thread. It repeated part of what was said earlier, but with even more detail. It stated, quote, "From what I understand and from what I was told, when Stephanie White was told this, she hit the roof because she didn't like it. And Steve Simon told her, 'You don't have to like it, but it's that way.'" End quote. That line right there is telling. If true, That would mean the higher-ups, allegedly led by Steve Simon, made it very clear that Caitlin Clark was supposed to be the focus of the franchise. And if Stephanie White didn't agree with that direction, well, too bad. Orders from the top are orders from the top. Now again, all of this is alleged, but it does raise some serious questions. If this conversation actually happened, why did the team shift away from that supposed plan? Why did the offense move away from Caitlin Clark's strengths when the front office allegedly wanted her front and center? Either way, this story just keeps getting deeper, and if any of this turns out to be true, then there's definitely more going on in Indiana than what's being shown on the surface. Now, from my understanding, this conversation allegedly took place right around the end of the season, somewhere in that window when the Fever's year had wrapped up and meetings were happening behind closed doors. And according to what's being said, this conversation involved Steve Simon himself. Yes, that's Steve Simon, the man many believe is truly running the show behind Pacers sports and entertainment. Now, again, let me make this crystal clear. I'm not saying this is confirmed, I'm not saying this happened, but if what's being alleged here is even halfway true, this is massive. This is big boy stuff. Here's the claim. Steve Simon supposedly called a meeting with Stephanie White and Amber Cox, and in that meeting, he laid it out straight. Things were going to run through Caitlin Clark. That's the direction, that's the plan, that's the moneymaker. Now, if that really happened, if Steve Simon really stepped in and told them it's Caitlin Clark's team from here on out, then we're talking about something that changes everything we've heard publicly. Because let's be real, it makes sense. Caitlin Clark isn't just a basketball player. She's an economic engine. Her presence alone skyrocketed ticket sales, boosted TV ratings, sold out arenas, and turned Indiana into the most talked about WNBA market in the country. That's not hype. That's business. So when we hear that Steve Simon might have said, "This is CCT from here on out," what that really means is follow the money. Because when Caitlin Clark is hitting those logo threes, when she's out there breaking records, going viral every night, everybody wins. The team, the league, the brand, the sponsors. But when she's limited, when she's not allowed to play her game, the whole product suffers. And that's why, if this story holds weight, it's a groundbreaking revelation. Because it suggests that internal decisions may have been clashing with what ownership wanted, that maybe the focus shifted away from what made the Fever's stock skyrocket in the first place. And if you're a businessman like Steve Simon, that's a problem. Like I always say, follow the money. When the money starts getting funny, that's when things start to get spooky. When the fans start tuning out, when the seats aren't filled, when the buzz dies down, that's when the people at the top start paying attention. So, I want to hear from you guys. Get down in the comments section and tell me what you think. Do you believe this meeting actually happened? Do you think Steve Simon stepped in and said it's Caitlin Clark's team from here on out? Because if that's true, this could be one of the biggest behind-the-scenes stories in the WNBA right now. And major shout out to Livewire Sports, Nicole Rants, and Venom Reacts. Great work uncovering this and keeping the conversation going. Because if there's even a shred of truth to this, yeah, this one's powerful.